We are Indiana Jones. We're going to be riding minecarts. The darkness is going to be chasing us. We're going to be smashed in the face with trolleys. We're also going to be dealing with void portals and all kinds of things. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to your next couple of dungeons for the War Within Alpha. And as always, I'd like to remind you that the PreachCon 2024 tickets go on sale on Saturday, the 4th of May. It's going to be a big 2-day event. All your favorite content creators, as many as you can, are going to be there, as well as competitions for all you guys. It's going to be a sick event. Check out the details down below. Let's get started. Two very, very good dungeons here. Actually, a very mixed vibe on which one people prefer. I'm going to start with the one that I prefer the least, but not because it's bad, but because the other one has got more fun things in it as far as I'm concerned. We're heading to the Stonevault. You're going to find both of these dungeons in the Rising Deep Zone number 2 of the War Within Alpha. Let's start with Edna. Edna's this whole place. Let me give a description of it. It feels like you're in Ulduar. It feels like a mix of Ulduar and like Blackrock Depths. It's got all this, it's atmospheric. It's got some huge, well-designed rooms. It almost feels like you're going into Mimiron's room at certain points. It's really interesting design-wise and gives it a good vibe. So think of it like Ulduar, Uldum, Blackrock Depths, all these kind of vibes mixed together in there. Really enjoyed this one. Edna is a little robot friend. Edna wants to befriend, and I was very, very interested that despite this mechanic exists in a lot of raids. I'm thinking back to the raid that I think it's Vault of the Incarnates with Kurog Grimtotem, that raid. This mechanic exists in there. Nobody on the alpha seems to know about this mechanic or what's supposed to do. What is the mechanic? Edna is going to be spawning spikes. Spikes out of the ground, and someone's going to have an arrow on them that breaks the spikes, and if you don't break the spikes, they're going to start ticking and ticking. In fact, there was a rock boss in another raid that had a very similar mechanic to it, and it's very clear people do not know about this mechanic. It was curious to me, but that is the general mechanic of this. You're going to be fighting Edna. Edna is going to be spawning these spikes. Now, the cool thing about this is the spikes spawn underneath players, which means you can completely control how and when. You want them in two groups, one group, because of course they do damage when they explode. How you're going to manage these, I don't know. But if you don't manage them, you're very quickly going to be overwhelmed. Haven't died to Edna yet because the boss doesn't have enough HP. Or at least we're very powerful because we have all our hero talents. So it's a very much a case of this is going to get real nasty real quick if you try and bypass this mechanic. Certainly as this boss goes up. But that's the main theme of this fight. Good solid first boss. Nice and obvious. At least I thought so. But yeah, nothing to worry about too much, which then takes us on to Skaramok. Okay, Skarmorak. I will say the way this dungeon is designed is quite cool. After you defeat Edna, you have any which way you want to go scenario. So this is not linear. You can go in very different ways, and it will give you fast travel back to the room to choose. So you have like two roads to go on before you're going to head off to the last boss, and it will fast travel you back. So you can pick and choose. Think of it like halls. I'm terrible with remembering these 8 billion dungeon names that exist in my brain, but the Valkyr Home, the Warrior Class Hall, that one. Whichever that is, where you go up the middle path, you kill one boss, where the dragons are doing lightning across the floor, and then you can go left to fight the maiden, or you go right to fight the wolf, that one. Very similar idea, except you will have a quicker fast travel back rather than just a speed buff and run your ass back. Skarmorak. Doing this fight correctly still feels brutal. Even for normal mode, I guess this fight might be a little overtuned. It's hard to tell. But the general idea with Skarmorak is that he will constantly spawn like floaty crystals, and you need to defeat them, and orbs will spawn, and you want to pick up these orbs because they give you a damage buff, although they do a lot of damage, and then eventually he will shield himself, and you need to break out the shield because it does a ton of damage. That's the idea. It's a very simple process, but it's quite brutal, as are a couple of the bosses in here. One thing I did find that Blizzard might want to fix is if you pull Skarmorak has to spawn the adds in a radius around him. If you pull him into a weird corner, he will spawn all the adds on top of each other, which means range, it's a little awkward for melee, can just cleave them all down super, super fast and not even worry about this mechanic at all, rather than sort of like individual tab target switching onto these adds. So a little bit of control can be done by the tank. Maybe Blizzard wants that to happen. I don't know. But yeah, this is just a simple yet very nasty fight. The damage ramps up very quickly, and the trash before it can be really brutal. In fact, I want to point out, this is the first dungeon that's had some of the nastiest trash in it, especially if your group is not interrupt aware. A lot of people on the alpha are used to having add-ons and big cast bars in front of them, which means interrupts are kind of lackluster in the most part. And like certainly the ones that start chain casting fear on the entire group, very nasty, leads to a lot of death when that goes wrong. You might see some weird things going on in the background depending on which footage you're looking at. I will point out Warlocks are currently like really bugged. Affliction is bugged, and Malefic Rapture is tagging everything that's like seemingly within line of sight, no matter how far away it is, even though they've not touched those ads and we can't even see them. Several of the runs we did with our Warlock, he was totally apologizing because he'd only set up Affliction, and it was pulling trash from like boss rooms miles away, just constantly streaming trash onto us. Nasty business. I want to go on to my favorite boss of the alpha so far. The Forge Speakers. I have no doubt this is going to change in some way, but right now, this thing is great. Why? It reminds me so much of Siegecrafter Black Fuse, all the way back from the Siege of Orgrimmar. All the way back then. We have two wondrous little friends here in the Forge Speakers, and they have a couple of mechanics that are tied, I think it's to time rather than anything else, but our health percentage. This is a very small room. Very, very small. And it's going to get even smaller and get very nasty. There's some very overlapping mechanics here. The main thing is they open ventilation vents that start filling the room with floods of lava. At the same time, each of them is going to grab a giant minecart and be dragging it across the room with a massive area denial. And this overlaps towards the end of the fight. You can outplay it, obviously, by pre-positioning, but the lava pools are kind of random, so they push you into different spots. If you get hit by the train, which a lot of people do because the room is very, very small and you have to adjust your position rather quickly, maybe with boss timers this won't be anywhere near as bad. But when that happens, you get stunned for a ridiculous amount of time, and the lava pools are growing, and that will just blow you up. The most people I've seen die in the alpha have been to this boss. It is crazy fun, though, because it's stressful, it's not too long, very nasty, and visually very cool. I love it when you see the speakers put the trolley on the back of them, and they're just pulling it across the room, and it's massive. It's absolutely huge in such a small room. Really great fight. The final boss, though, once again, I said this in our last video looking at the first two dungeons, is kind of the easiest, at least so far. This High Speaker Eric is our final grand finale boss here. This is like a noob mechanic that some people don't get what's going on with the High Speaker, but once you do, you're like, oh, okay. So he's just a little dwarfy boy. Most people think this boss should be buffed in some way. A little dwarfy boy with two portals behind him. If you stand on the portals, you die, okay, but you get a very nasty permanent debuff that constantly ramps up damage, unless you go near the void portal and just drop it off. That's it. Like, beyond that, the boss doesn't really do much of anything besides, like, a frontal cleave, and he just dies. You can die, and I have wiped this fight because nobody knew what to do with the debuff, because you're like, oh, I'm not going to stand on the portal. I think even if they move the portals around, so, like, if a debuff gets dropped off, it closes the portal and another one reopens. Something like that could be really fun. So low mobility, go and drop it off, or melee and range, go and deal with another one. Something to utilize this giant space. It's in a very large room, certainly compared to what we had with the Forge Speakers. But yeah, it's the simplest of the bosses. Once you know one thing, which is, oh, just get rid of your debuff. And even if one person doesn't, you're kind of okay. You're kind of okay. But let's go to, like, the more fun dungeon. The one that I really, really like. And again, controversy. Some people have like, I don't like this one at all. I really like it. It's the Darkflame Cleft. The Darkflame Cleft is the Kobold Dungeon. I can't believe this. The Kobold Dungeon is the more fun dungeon. A lot of interactivity in this dungeon. The vibe is very similar to what you've seen with a lot of caves. Like, visually, it's okay. It's not amazing. It's what you do inside. This is thematic as hell, this place. They've had so much fun with kobolds, even from the delves to this. Check out our video on delves if you want to see it. First boss, old Waxbeard. Bunch of train tracks. Constantly summoning in more kobolds. He has a fixate. He'll throw a candle at one of you and the kobolds chase the candle, right? It's funny. And all that kind of stuff is going on. And the train will keep coming across. There's a temptation I've seen with nearly every tank to tank the boss in the middle. Don't do that, because that's on the train tracks where there's constantly a minecart going around. But it seems the minecarts can kill all the kobolds as well while you're DPSing the boss. So you have some management there that you'll probably want to work with, kind of similar to the pirate dragon, where, you know, you had a ton of ads, but you didn't really want to DPS them. You want to DPS the boss, and you can manage them in a different way. That kind of idea with old Waxbeard. But great little boss. Really funny watching the trolleys go by and just Zergs observes a kobold. And kind of the noob trap of just AoEing constantly instead of just killing the boss. Working with it like that. We then moved on to Blazicon. Blazicon has, again, a mechanic. People are either ignoring this or they don't see what's supposed to happen here. Is that Blazicon is just a big fire guy. But his basic mechanic is that he will mark like 3 people with a barrage of fire. And all you do is you kite out to the edge where these giant wax candles are. That's it. You kite out to them and you use the barrage to light the candle. And once you light the candle, that area of the room gets denied temporarily. But then when his main mechanic comes out where he AoEs, he like lights all the candles, because you've already lit those candles, he can't light that area and it creates a safe space. That's the idea. You can do this, at least in normal, with just one person. So the healer can, the rest of the people can just kite the fire, while as one person, like the healer, just runs out, lights the candle, creates one safe space available for everybody when this mechanic comes out. But nice and simple, nothing too crazy going on with this one. Nothing too wacky going on. But the next one, the Candle King, even better. The Candle King of the Kobolds. The story leads you to the Candle King. He is going to be overwhelming you. This is a fight clearly designed to last longer than it does on normal mode. This fight can... at this point, people are just ignoring what's going on here, but it's so apparent that if this fight lasted like 60 seconds longer, we would be in a really bad way. Essentially, he's got a bunch of wax figurines in the room that are pulsing damage onto the party, right? And you can use them to block mechanics. Like, you can actually get an arrow and you can stand behind it and it will hit the candle and not you. However, these things start spawning faster and faster and faster. Now, you will get a debuff with a circle around you which will melt the candles and get rid of them, because they're going to keep ramping up how many there are. You can hit multiple and just clear the room, but you want to be managing these candles, because if you just leave them getting bigger and bigger and bigger, then you're going to die, like, really, really quickly. I like this fight because it's unassuming in its current normal mode form, and you just know this thing's going to be really horrible if people don't pay attention to what's going on, or perhaps get rid of all the candles and you don't have the ability to block the mechanic. Leave this candle up, right? Leave this one up. Don't hit that one, and then someone's going to hit it, or you just ignore them, and you're like, oh god, what are we going to do? Because now there's like 13 of these candles up, and we're just dying. This is something that's going to ramp pretty quickly. Next, the whole place gets very thematic. All right. Some people like this, some people don't. I think it just needs some tweaking. The essential idea is we're going to guide a trolley through the darkness. A lot of the Kobold story is trying to understand why they always have the candles with them, because they're terrified of the darkness, and lo and behold, something devilish does lurk in the dark. So you have like a debuff when you're outside of candlelight. So we're going to push this trolley along the tracks and try and keep the candle alive. At the same time, enemies are going to come and to snuff out our candles so we can get out of their territory, right? Simple idea. They've got their candles, but they want us to get out. So what you do is you're going to push through an extremely dark cavern. It's so dark, and Blizzard is having fun with this, that there are absolutely holes in this room. And when you're going to fetch a candle to refresh your trolley's candle, because there's little candles dotted all throughout this cavern, and the idea is somebody's going to run off, grab that candle, run back to the trolley, and refresh our candle so we can keep moving forward. Okay, you could absolutely fall down these holes. You get used to where they are very quickly. I've done this in most of the dungeon runs we've been in, because people don't realize that either this something that can change here. Either Blizzard reduces the amount of candle drain the main trolley has, because it drains extremely quickly. Like, you can see it in the footage. Like, once this thing starts draining, it drains so fast. Or they put a couple more candles a little bit closer, because sometimes you are running through the entire cavern to grab a candle and then running back, which is like, if you're not feral or a monk of some description, it's a real journey. And also, ultimately, it's not that fun. You're not taking part in any of the DPS, you're not tanking, you're not healing, you're not playing your character, you're just running through the dark to find a candle, to run back, and then you're immediately going out and doing it again. Now, these candles do refresh, they respawn after a little while, but seemingly not regularly enough to stay in the area. We've had several of these, like, guard the trolley mechanics in the past, so you'll be familiar with the mechanic, but usually you don't have to go too far away, so you can still take part in playing the game. Right now, I would agree you can't do that, but it is kind of fun at the same time. Like, it's kind of fun being in this pitch black environment. Blizzard doesn't really mess with pitch black enough. You can kind of make out what's going on, but you can't see the floor. We've had plenty of people fall in the holes and things like that. But it is fun. Once we get to the end and you've got your trolley, you're then going to have a little bit of an RP sequence, which is not annoying for Mythic Plus purposes, where you'll all get dynamite and the candles have gone out and now darkness is chasing you, and it is the final boss is the darkness. And the darkness is chasing you in a very Indiana Jones style down a track, and you're throwing dynamite at it, and you can actually, this will be something to focus on, you can min-max the amount of damage you can put onto the darkness with the dynamite here, so you have less health to do during the boss fight. So it is important that you don't just AFK this. It gives you some interaction as it happens, and then you'll end up in the final boss room. Now, the final boss, the actual darkness itself, works with a similar mechanic to the trolley. So they've used the trolley to educate on you what's supposed to happen, is you will have a lantern. This lantern will provide you a buff as long as you guys are stood within a radius, which will allow you to actually damage the darkness. If you are not stood on the candle, you do like 90% reduced damage, 90-95% reduced damage. So you obviously want that to happen. So the mechanic is very similar to what you've had in the past, is your lantern is on the floor. You can pick it up and move it, which is important, because if it takes damage from the boss's abilities, it drains much faster. And then there are some replacement candles constantly spawning in the room. Depending on how your group functions, you're either going to have one player just constantly refreshing the candle, because you could just leave it in the lantern in one place, and they spawn enough that you could just go backwards and forwards. But that person doesn't really get to play the game in any way. You could do both players running out, and then you get a little leeway to play the game. Or you can have somebody actually manage the lantern, pick it up, move it out of its frontal cone, things like that, and reposition it. All those things are going to matter in Mythic Plus. How it's going to work out for you in pugs and things, hard to say, but I like this fight. I like the idea that it's similar to like Shriekwing with managing the lantern. Make somebody getting some assigned job. I am always a fan of that. Is like, I will take care of the lantern. I will do this, this, and this. Or you're going to have somebody... I think the default will be whoever has high mobility. Again, your druids, your monks. You guys are in charge of just refreshing the light, and the rest of us are kind of going to AFK, stand on the lantern, and just DPS the boss. That's what I've seen happen, or be the default position over time. And this is why some people don't like this dungeon. It's like, depending on your role, you're either kind of doing nothing. So in the trolley case, you're just stood on the trolley, and you're just AoEing some random mobs that show up, and on the last boss, you just stood on the lantern and DPSing the boss. And then one guy's like just running all over the place, doing all the jobs for you, right? That's kind of a way this can go. I don't think, though, that's how it's going to be when we're involved dungeons and we're communicating and things like that. I don't think that's the way it's going to go, which means I like the RP. It's not slow. It's thematic. It makes sense. It's a variable. So it's not just, you know, collection of mobs in a corridor. Now you've got something interesting to keep your eye and attention on that sort of breaks the pace, has some fun, and works really well while in an organized group. But you guys make your own minds up. Those are the latest 2 dungeons. I'll, of course, be back when the next 2 dungeons are available.